Okay, I just wanted to review in an illustrated format kind of way. Shalom, everybody. Hope everybody's doing good. Um, the the breakup of the continents after the global flood. Christian Carpenter, good afternoon. Oh, because the other one was had a poor connection, internet connection, and I wasn't able to show anything very well. This one will be a little bit better as far as being able to show what I'm talking about or explain what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead right to the information and we'll see what we can find here. Okay. So let's see if I can pull this up a little bit. Oops, there we go. Here we have the continents before they broke apart. This is the evidence of the continents before they broke apart. We have here, of course, the fossil evidence here of this animal here, which is, these animals here. And here's some other animals here that stretch between Africa, Madagascar, India, and Antarctica. And the plants go all the way through. This plant fossil here goes all the way through and connects all of them. That'd be South America, Africa, Madagascar, India, Antarctic, and Australia. So my question is, why would these fossils be lined up? Because this is after the deposition of the global flood, right? So after the deposition of the global flood, this is how these fossils are lined up. So the breakup of the continents had to have been after the deposition of the sediments of the global flood. Of course, geology is the same thing. Geology lines up to these areas. Of course, these are scientific studies and everything. So if the breakup happened, it would have to have occurred after the deposition of the sediments of the global flood that buried living organisms that were existing at the time of the global flood. So, see if we can move along here. The next piece of evidence would be these glacial striations and the direction that they move. Okay. So apparently the glaciers, this must have been like the area of snowfall or something, were moving in this direction here, as it shows here, which I have another picture that's probably better, or this picture here. But it's basically all showing the same thing. It's the direction of the movement of the glaciers on top of the sediments deposited by the global flood. So number one, India today is nowhere near the South Pole. See, here's the South Pole down here. India, India is way up here. Okay, so that's how far India moved, which is above the equator, but it's in the tropics still. See, it's about the same as Cuba, about the same latitude as Cuba. So we see here the direction, of course, of the glacier, the movement of the glaciers, of course, after the deposition of the sediments of the global flood. So the breakup of the continents again had to have been after the deposition of the global sediments of the global flood. I mean, the sediments of the global flood. And it's showing clearly the direction of the sediments, the movement of the sediments. I mean, the movement of the glaciers. And of course, there's no glaciers in the tropics. The glaciers formed at the poles. India was at the pole up to 100 years after the global flood. That's when they broke apart. That's when they moved. Of course, I've mentioned a number of times. I've mentioned the animals. The animals that are in South America made it to South America before the breakup of the global flood. The people never made it to South America from Africa because the people were too busy doing what? Trying to build the Tower of Babel in Mesopotamia. They were stuck in Mesopotamia. God told them to spread out, be fruitful and multiply. They wanted to stick together. They thought that they were going to lose their name or something, lose their what do you call it, the ego or whatever it was they were going to lose. But anyways, so they were 100 years. They were up here in Mesopotamia building the Tower of Babel, up to 100 years. Then, 100 years after the global flood, in the days of Peleg, that's when the earth was divided. Of course, by way of review, the jaguars made it to South America. The aardvark made it to South America. Of course, the counterpart of the jaguar would be the leopard. The counterpart of the aardvark is the African ant bear. Same thing. It's an aardvark, an African aardvark. Greater grison in South America is the same thing as the African honey badger in Africa. So these animals made it with ease to South America because they spread out as soon as they had the chance to. They made it to South America while the people had to go. The people wanted to get to South America. They had to go the other way around by Asia. They had to go through Asia all the way up through Alaska down here, all the way to South America, which is what they did. But by the time they spread out, by the time people spread out, there was a divide here as the waters flowed in the days of Peleg. Divided came to mean as the waters flow. So that the people never made it to South America because it was obviously too far away. So that's indicative. Not only do we have the uh, the geology matching up of the sediments deposited by the global flood. We have the fossils lining up that were deposited in the sediments deposited by the global flood. And we have the living animals that made it to South America from Africa, which are the same animal. And the fact that the people never made it from Africa to South America going this way, they had to go the other way around, all the way through Asia, down through North America into South America, which is what they did. So then you have all the megaliths and amazing architecture. Somehow they were able to melt bricks or something, melt huge stones and shape the huge stones, and it was amazing, which is what seems to be the case. But anyway, so that's about it for that. Let me just go back here and check to see what's going on here. If I may. There's Sandy. Hi, Sandy. Sorry for the last time. It was breaking up a lot. I know that you mentioned it. Okay. So there are some other things that I wanted to mention as well. Let me get this back up here if I can. Oh, this one here. So the other evidence of the breakup of the continents in the days of Peleg is the interesting curiosity that the global flood cut in half the lifespan of people born after the flood. It was cut in half from less than 1,000 to less than 500 years. You see this? Less than 500 years. Something happened in the global flood where the lifespan was cut in half of everyone born after the global flood. Then in the days of Peleg, the lifespan was cut in half again. So the lifespan was cut in half a second time in the days of Peleg. So something happened in the days of Peleg that when Peleg was born, he only lived less than half of 500, which is less than 250. Everyone afterward lived on less than 250 years old, right? Then by the time we get Abraham's father, Terah, lived 205. Abraham lived 175. Then, of course, Jacob only lived, a certain amount, 100, what was it, 130 or something? Anyway, so we can see an interesting fact here. Might be considered an anomaly if you didn't know what was happening. But something happened in the days of Peleg. It cut in half the lifespan of people a second time. And then after that, the lifespan just kept going down. So that's, to me, another indication that in the days of Peleg, the continents broke apart, possibly from the same cause of the global flood, which could have been a bombardment from outer space or something like that. And it happened a second time in the days of Peleg, 100 years after the global flood. broke up the continent, which could be the result of the for some reason I'm not getting here. I gotta go back somehow. It's the result of the asteroid. Maybe it was the result of the asteroid hitting here in the Gulf of Mexico, or something else that could have caused the breakup of the continents. Because over here in the Marianas Trench, we see this section here spread this way, spread to the west. As this area here spread to the west, pressure was put on the Pacific plates such that the Marianas Trench appeared to have buckled under. That's why there's a very deep Marianas Trench here. Instead of shoving underneath the continents completely, the Pacific plates, or instead of pushing up the mountains or whatever, the weight of the ocean caused the plate to buckle under and form the Marianas Trench, which is as deep as commercial airplane fly high. So when you see a commercial airplane flying high, and you can hardly see the airplane because of how high it is, that's as deep as what the ocean is in the Marianas Trench. It's 35,000 feet, something like that, 36,000 feet. So everything is fitting, everything falls in line, because this spread here in the Atlantic Ocean is estimated to be younger than the spread in the Pacific Ocean, which would have been after the global flood. I mean, at the time of the global flood, and the runoff, when the ocean sank down and the water ran off the continents, this Pacific spread is older than the Atlantic spread. So that fits. India's glacial striations fit because they're on top of the sediments deposited by the global flood, the same as the fossils are in the sediments deposited by the global flood that connect all the continents. So what the Bible actually says is true, that in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided. It doesn't say the people were divided, although that was a result as well of the continents being divided. The people, it was such a catastrophic event, and there's such little information about it. We can surmise that people separated into their family groups because of the catastrophic event when they were building the Tower of Babel, that they began to speak their own languages. And of course, that was all by the hand of God. God caused them to speak their own languages but it was as a result of the breakup of the continents, which was a catastrophic event of which only the Bible mentions it in passing. But that's probably what happened, is that people, when a catastrophic event occurs, they run immediately to their family groups, and they began speaking their own languages. Then they began separating. The the Hamites went to Africa, and Canaan went to Palestine, or Canaan, land of Canaan, Palestine, and it's not even a legitimate word, but it's a made-up word. But anyways, the Canaanites went to Canaan, and the Phoenicians, Put, descendants of Put, the North Africans went to North Africa, Mitzrayim went to Egypt, and some of the sons went into like the area of Egypt. The descendants of Cush went to Ethiopia, the area of Ethiopia, and Nimrod stayed behind. Nimrod was the son of Cush, but Nimrod stayed behind in Mesopotamia because he was the king of the land of Shinar, or Mesopotamia, where Abraham also was from. Abraham was a Sumerian from the city of Ur. And of course, he had run ins with Nimrod, but Nimrod is the son of Cush, remember. So then there was a house of Nimrod. After Nimrod died, the house of Nimrod was subdued for a while, according to extra biblical records. And but it was still a large population. The house of Nimrod was still a large population, and the only haplogroup, Y chromosome haplogroup in the area is the CY chromosome. And there's another DY chromosome of the Andamanese, Tibetans, and Japanese as well, which could have been from one of the sons of Cush as well that were in this area of Arabia, southern Arabia near the coast. They could have, I mean, the migration went to India. Obviously, there were Hamitic or dark-skinned populations in India that built a highway to Sri Lanka. Andamanese Islands are right here. So the Andamanese have a DY chromosome. So that's why this entire area is largely dark-skinned people, all the way over to Papua New Guinea, which has the KY chromosome, or the M and the S and the K. Half of Australia, or not half, but part of Australia is K. The other part is C from the household of Nimrod. And the CY chromosome went all the way to America, the Americas, North America, South America, up here, the Na-Dene Indians, Central America, where the Olmec statues were, northern tip of South America, where they exist to this day. And the Olmec statues, curiously, have features very similar to the Polynesians, who incidentally are also descendants of Nimrod with a CY chromosome. So everything matches up beautifully. The other thing that I was noticing is that Tubal was said to have settled in Italy. So I went looking for the KY chromosome in Italy, and up to 8% of the population in Central Italy has the KY chromosome, while all the others are basically outsiders from other places. So, and then there's also Madai, also settled up in this area in Europe, and that area too has the QY chromosome. Even up in the Scandinavia, there's a QY chromosome to the day, which is the Medes, which is the Y chromosome of the Medes, which also spread all the way to North and South America, the QY chromosome. But I was wondering how the QY chromosome got up in this area in Northern Europe. Turns out that Madai, part of Madai, descendants of the Madai or the Medes, did inhabit this area of Europe. So that's the QY chromosome. KY chromosome is tubal. Of course, his descendants are, of course, KY chromosome is throughout Asia, all the way to Australia and these areas here. The Denisovan population, people with the most Denisovan DNA is this area right here of the M, S, and K populations. So that's why I assigned the M and the S as belonging to the K, since the M and the S are so close to each other and so close to K as well, and very much associated with the Denisovan DNA, which is Eurasian or Japhethite DNA, as well as African. So everywhere there's Denisovan DNA, there is either Asian populations, which is all the way in South America as well, because Q, Madai, is Japhethite, and African. So everywhere there's African, there's Denisovan DNA sharing. They share DNA with Africans and Eurasians, especially in this area right here of Papua New Guinea. But the areas that do not have Denisovan DNA are the largely Semitic populations, which are, of course, in the center and in the area of the Middle East, what we call the Middle East, or the Arabia, Levant area. But then there's also a light streak going all the way up through Scandinavia that lacks Denisovan DNA. So this light streak going up through Asia all the way up into Scandinavia and even affecting Britain, which I've showed before on other maps, is exactly the route in the area where the lost tribes of Israel are found, which is Semitic and neither Eurasian nor Hamitic. And it shows a streak going right up the middle of Europe, all the way to Scandinavia, and then going all the way to England, where there's less Denisovan DNA, where the lost tribes of Israel that are not so lost, which I also showed, this whole area is filled with the IY chromosome, which is the lost tribes of Israel, which are not so lost anymore. And of course the J2, which is considered Judaic or Jewish, the J2Y chromosome is in reality largely the descendants of David or the house of David. So the J2 is highly concentrated in this area in Iran and Persia, Turkey, all the way along the Silk Road and up the Rhine River as well, especially where they used to be in greater numbers, of course. And there's a huge Judaic or Davidic population going along the Silk Road as well. So that's that. I'm showing a small map here, but that's basically that. Let me go back and check here, see how things are going. Yeah, I'm glad it's sounding better now. But it really is amazing. Just look at the table of nations. Of course, this is the Chinese records, which is non-biblical sources right here. It says non-biblical sources. That's what That's what this is here. The Xinglong Wang Ti. This is the Foy or Yao Fo Fo He or Yao. No, anyways, that's the Chinese non-biblical sources of descendants of Noah. For some reason, they added that in. But anyways, this is the Table of Nations right here. Almost, well, part of it. This is the grandsons of Noah, basically, with Arpachshad being the grandson of Noah. Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, Tiraz. 7 sons of Japheth, which is RoqtKn and L. Then there's the Hamitic, which is Cush, Put, Canaan, Mitzrayim. And then, of course, Nimrod is the son of Cush with a CY chromosome and possibly the D as well. So, because either the D is either a descendant of Nimrod or the D is a brother of Nimrod, son of Cush. But probably I'm thinking it's more another line descendant of Nimrod from Arabia. And either way, it's a descendant of Cush. The C and the D are descended from Cush. And it is really amazing how, as far as I'm concerned, every Y haplogroup is accounted for, with the caveat of Cush, Put, Mitzrayim, and Canaan. These are all E3s. These are all categorized as E3. And so Cush is an E3 V32. Mitzrayim is an E3 V12. Put is an E3 M81. Canaan is an E3 M123, which I mean, that's how I've designated it so far. So every other A, B, C, and D is descended from probably Cush and or maybe Put or somebody, but probably Cush. And they just they just designate it backward. In other words, they started labeling it backwards instead of forwards from the main populations. And the same thing kind of happened with the descendants of Israel. The I is kind of named backwards. It's I2 and I1. And or it could be that the I1 is the first exile of Israel, and I2 would be the second exile of Israel or another exile. And of course, the Judaic populations were exiled as well. The J2 was exiled as well, and that's why the J2 has huge populations in Anatolia, Turkey, Iraq, Iran, and those places, and of course Italy, and throughout the Mediterranean, because they were exiled the same. They were just not exiled as soon. Of course, the first tribe to be exiled was Dan, and Dan went all through Europe. You have indications of Dan being all through Europe, tribe of Dan, and the Mediterranean as well, which is a lot of study. It's hard to keep up because I learn about one thing and then I learn about another thing and then I forget about what I first learned, and there's just so much to know about it. But it's all there. You know, this It says Turkey. Some people say maybe it wasn't actually Turkey, maybe it was more Turkmenistan area or someplace. But regardless, that's where the greater number, the greater diversity is in Turkmenistan and Turkey and Iran and those places. They have a greater diversity of both the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial DNA as well. So both the maternal and paternal haplogroups are all represented in this area of Turkmenistan, with the exception of the L maternal mitochondrial haplogroup, which is exclusively in Africa. So all of the maternal descendants of the wife of Ham went to Africa, while the descendants of or the Nimrod obviously um, married other populations or married other descendants. And but that's about it for that, I guess. Right now, I just wanted to have a better illustrated example of or explanation of the breakup of the continents, which actually have to be after the global flood. They can't be at the time of the global flood because these glacial striations are on top of the sediments deposited by the global flood. And the fossil evidence, as well as the living animals that made it to South America, show that Africa and South America were connected after the global flood. So, because we have the greater grison, which is the African honey badger, we have the American aardvark, which is the African ant bear. We have the jaguar, South American jaguar, which is the same thing as a leopard, and possibly the prairie dog, which is the same thing as a meerkat, which I gotta double check on that, but it's another possibility of the same animal in both places that reached both places after the global flood. But the people didn't reach it because they were too busy building the Tower of Babel, and they didn't spread out until after the break of the continents. So that's why they never made it to South America from Africa. They had to go all the way the other way around through Asia and North America and Alaska to get to South America, which is what they did. Anyways, that should be about it for right now. Um, hope everybody is doing well, and God bless everybody. And take care. The only other thing I would like to perhaps talk about is the when I try to explain this to atheists and skeptics, and they just have such a hard time with it, and it's like they don't have any evidence of their own. I'm showing them all this evidence, and they're like saying, "No, but you believe in the Bible. That's mythical." No, it's not mythical. I mean, for one thing, the Bible is the most valid historical record existing on planet Earth to begin with. And for another thing, um, it's all, I mean, the Bible is contemporary with all the other historical records, and these are actual ancient civilizations that are all descended from the grandsons and great grandsons of Noah. And there are no other ancient civilizations. I named them all. They're all, like I said, the grandsons, great grandsons of Noah. And I mean, there's so many impressive things like like the Jewish people calling themselves Ashkenaz because they lived in the area of Ashkenaz, the son of Gomer, the son of Japheth, the son of Noah. I mean, there's so many things. You know, Cush is well known, a well known civilization. It's called Cush to this day, pretty much. I mean, in many circles, anyway. Yeah, God bless. Thanks for for this. I found it interesting. Says Sandy, learning a lot. Yeah, it's just one of my interests, and I find it very interesting, and because from being a missionary kid raised in a foreign country with other populations, other people, I find it very interesting. As a matter of fact, they read me the story of the five missionaries that were killed um, in the area of the Auca Indians, and they read that story to me as when I was a child because it happened like 5 years earlier or something like that, and so it was like fresh on their minds, and they showed how the wives of the five missionaries that were killed eventually went back into the tribes, and the homicide rate within the tribe went from around 60% to down to around 0%, because of the gospel that was shared. Yeah, Jimmy Elder. Yeah, yeah, and that's what I grew up with. And it turns out that the Auca Indians, the Waorani, they call themselves the Waorani and the Wayuu, they have Nimrod's CY chromosome. So, and if you think of the Europeans as being descendants of Abraham, maybe some of them were, maybe they weren't, but it would be almost like Abraham and Nimrod all over again. But the takeaway is that the gospel changes everyone's lives, and we need to bring the gospel to every people because it's the power of salvation, and it affects even those who don't believe. It affects their lives. It benefits their lives in many ways, even if they don't believe. Their their lives are in effect transformed, from a homicide rate of 60% to near zero. That's a change, and it's only because of the truth of God's word. So, thanks for everyone's participation, and God bless. And I'll see you next time.